Hello, and welcome to the ninth chapter of Aristotle's Art of Rhetoric. In this chapter, Aristotle considers two more concepts, virtue and vice, and the associated concept of the noble and the base. The noble being that which is productive of virtue and pleasant, and the base being the converse. The reason Aristotle considers these concepts is in connection with praising and blaming a subject in a speech, primarily deliberative speeches here, which are political speeches, the purpose of which are to urge the audience towards a particular action. But they can also be used in oratory speeches, which are speeches that recount the person's deeds, praise that person, or censure the person in the opposite case, and forensic speeches, which are examining the past and casting doubt on anything that may or may not have happened in the past. Aristotle takes you in this chapter through several concepts that help you take the view of the character, or in his words, the required character. Required implying the character you need to produce the intended effect for persuading the audience. And that can be the character of both the speaker or of the subject. And praise can be both frivolous or serious. And it can come in many forms. And let's examine some of those forms. So as mentioned before, something is noble because it's good in and of itself, and it's praiseworthy, and it's pleasant. Virtues, according to Aristotle, are all noble because they tend to be productive of things that are good. They either provide the good or preserve the good. And these virtues are of several forms: justice, courage, temperance, magnificence, magnanimity, liberality, gentleness, prudence, and wisdom. Aristotle has a view on the relative importance of these virtues. To Aristotle, justice and courage are the most important because they're the most useful. Courage is the most useful in times of war, and justice in times of peace. Without these two things, you cannot have the other things, according to Aristotle. Temperance is how we deal with physical pleasures in the context of the law, and incontinence is the opposite. Liberality is where we spend for the good of others. Magnanimity is the propensity for humans to want to do good to humanity, or to do good on a large scale. And its opposite is meanness of spirit, stinginess. And magnificence is, interestingly, a virtue productive of greatness in matters involving the spending of money. So I suppose he means the construction of great buildings, of libraries and so forth, the raising of armies, and things like this. Prudence is the virtue of understanding which enables men to come to wise decisions about the relation to happiness of the goods and evils that have been previously mentioned. That's very interesting. So prudence is how we deal with the various virtues, prioritize between them, and balance among them harmoniously, because excesses of a given virtue can turn into a vice, and that is considered immediately afterwards by Aristotle in this context. So if we have too much courage, we can be rash, and Aristotle indeed would say you can frame a person's actions in any such way. If someone is being reckless and in putting themselves into danger, we can call them courageous instead. If someone has been gullible, if they've been stupid, if they've been hoodwinked out of their kindness, we can just call them good-spirited. We can call them kind. And so forth. So that's as much as Aristotle has to say about the virtues. The next thing that he considers are how to exaggerate or to amplify the nobility of a given person. And this can be done in many ways. One of the ways you can do that is by appealing to that person's distinctiveness. They can be distinctive by their heritage, their family, by their actions. We can make their actions out to be one of a kind, to be irreplicable. We can make them out to be inimitable. They can be distinctive by their calling, by their purpose. We can appeal to divinity. When we talk about someone, we can appeal to them having a special mission that no one else can do. So that's one of the ways we can make a man seem as if, or a person or an individual, seem as if it's special. And if a person has bad qualities, as mentioned before, we can reframe them in a positive light. If a person's outspoken, if he doesn't know when to be silent, if he's not careful with his words or precise with his words, if he's not empathetic, we can just call him impressive or superb or ambitious or possessing the qualities of leadership rather than boneheaded or pig-headed or arrogant. And if a man is reckless with his wealth, we can just call him generous, and so forth. So that's a way to airbrush a person's shortfalls. Finally, when we're addressing an audience, we need to think about what they value. And this is something that Aristotle mentioned as the most important thing in political speech making in the prior chapter. It's appealing to what the audience esteems, regardless of what we think about it. So if you're addressing Athenians, you appeal to their virtues. Spartans, you appeal to the Spartan virtues, so forth. Another way we can make someone seem more noble is by, as before, tying their actions to their noble heritage. So it's what their father did, what their institution did. It's normal for them, and therefore it's something that they've done intentionally. Or we can create contrast to their station in life. So if it's just an average person, we can praise them for doing more than average. And so, for example, someone who's just an average in courage, does heroic deeds in adversity, we can praise him for that. And the quote here is the saying, if Iphicrates, think what I was and what I am. And again, this is something that politicians do. They will always appeal to their humble beginnings, regardless of the truth of that. The contrast tends to have a evocative effect in the audience. So much for praise. So, praise in Aristotle's view is referring to a person's good qualities. So their nobility, their good heritage, and so forth. Encomium, which is a word that means to revel in, is a form of praise that refers to a person's deeds, so what they've done. And the other things, the praise about their qualities, their accessories of birth, in Aristotle's terms, such as their parentage or their education, just make the deeds that we're referring to more credible. But it's the deeds that are the substance of an encomium. So how can we make the deeds most compelling? One way to do it is by exaggerating. We can make it the magnitude bigger than it was, or we can say that this is a person that has done this first, or has done it better than anyone else, and so forth. Another thing we can do is make comparisons. If the deeds themselves aren't that noteworthy, we can instead say that at least they're better than X or Y. And this makes sense in the context of the defense, where a person's poor fortune may have led them to do something bad. We can say, actually, people in similar situations have done much worse. But in the instance where someone is actually impressive, or has done something impressive, or noble, or virtuous, we can compare them to a famous or dead person, and that can amplify or inflate their deeds, and is another way of praising a person effectively. So that concludes the essence of the 9th chapter. And as with the other arguments, if you want to censor someone, you just do the opposite. Thank you. Hope it was helpful, and speak soon.